The Open is closed. We recap 3 weeks of tests and take a look ahead at the rest of the season next on our Open Wrap-Up Show. Hi everybody and welcome inside the Talking Elite Fitness Studios. I'm Sean Woodland with Tommy Marquez. The 2023 Noble CrossFit Open is now behind us. You and I got to get out on the road a little bit and be there I was there for all three. You were there for one, the one in New Jersey that we got to do together, but you did every test in a different location.
Yeah, so week one, got off a cruise ship, went and did it at CrossFit Invictus. Then week two, after going to CrossFit Bison, flew back across the country, got to do it at home. And then last week in week three, we were out in Indy for the Combine, so we dropped into Myriad CrossFit, had the chance to do it there as part of their Friday Night Lights.
Before we can take a look back on the Open in total, let's look back on 23.3. Here are your unofficial top scores from the final test. Dani Speegle at 7:12. This would be her first ever Open win, and Tola Moraquinho for the men at 7 minutes, 44 seconds. And Tommy, no surprise that when you have a test that for the best of the best comes down to how you handle a heavy barbell, Dani Speegle and Tola Moraquinho are towards the top.
Yeah, like as you mentioned, it should come as no surprise that for Dani Speegle putting up a top score, not only is she great at the individual components, you look at upside down on her hands, handstand push-ups, handstand walking variants, and a heavy barbell cycling. She's arguably the best when it comes to doing those things under fatigue and with heavy interference like we saw this week with all of that shoulder fatigue. And you go back to when she broke through on the sport, 2019 Wodapalooza, there was an event called Circus Act. You had to handstand walk across the obstacle course, and you had an increasingly heavy power snatch barbell. Actually, she was the only athlete that could power snatch all of them and then go tap and go. And that was her announcement to the world. And she's just continued to build on that here. And then you go on her male counterpart with regards to these skills and strengths. For Tola, it's almost the harder and heavier, the better with regards to the skills upside down and the barbell. You look at some of his event performances across his career. Event 5 at Dubai when he was on a team with Pro 1, and then Event 7 at the Mayhem Classic. Both of those had parallel deficit handstand push-ups in bunches. He put up the fastest split time for any athlete in Dubai, and then he won that event as an individual to close out the Mayhem Classic. We're used to seeing the eye-popping lifts from him, but I think we're starting to get more and more evidence that he's just as skilled as he is strong.
Let's take a look at the women's leaderboard, and if you kind of peruse that a little bit, who else stood out to you?
Well, on the women's side, it's a pair of current and former teenage athletes. You go Lexi Neely, just 5 years ago, was competing in the 14 to 15 division. You know, 2021, she went team. She was 14th at semifinals. Last year, she goes 20th at the Atlas Games, starting to build her resume as an individual athlete. So being able to finish top 10 worldwide unofficially in this score with the mix of skill and strength, I think is a huge boost for her. And then you go to an athlete that's still in the teenage divisions. Lucy McGonigal is your reigning 14 to 15 division champion on the women's side from the games last year. And she's gonna be competing in the 16 to 17 division with still another year under her belt. So I think for her to go top 25 in this event, knowing that she's still got a few years of her runway, that's a huge result with Olivia Kerstetter potentially moving out of the way in that teenage division.
Now over on the men's side, there's a guy out of Europe that you probably should start paying attention to now.
Yeah, Victor Hoffer. We actually got a little bit of an introduction from him week one when Brian picked him as one of the impressive performances. Well, now this is a second top 10 finish worldwide in the Open to close out his Open season. You know, being top 10 in this workout, like I mentioned, you know, heavy barbell, high skill, high interference component. You look at what his historical performance was the last 2 years. He went team, started to dip his toe into the individual side at Dubai earlier this year. I think this could be a huge boost knowing that 2 out of these 4 tests, I was one of the best in the world at, you know, on any given day. Granted, it's in your home gym. And then you go down to the team division. We're talking about the performance from Tola, but one of his competitors in the team division this year is undoubtedly going to be Invictus, and Josh Alchama won half of that equation on the men's side, being top 15 worldwide in this particular event. You know, Josh is incredibly strong, but I've talked to them after being down at Invictus in week 1, and they're focusing on some of the individual components to come back together as a team, and this is a huge step in the right direction for them.
Let's take a look at the leaderboard where it stands now after the third and final test of the Open. These are unofficial, and Jeff Adler looking like he's going to win the Open for the second time in 3 years. And if these results hold, Moraquinho, Mertens, Christoffel, and Goldbaum, this will be their best career finish in the Worldwide Open. Over on the women's side, Mal O'Brien, for the second straight season, wins the Open. Now, Ariel Lowen is kind of the outlier here in the top 5, the only athlete who's older than 21 years old. She's in her 30s. Everyone else 21 or younger. You don't want to read too much into the Open, but there are some women who are on the right track right now.
Yeah, you look at the top overall standings for the women, the first 9 all have individual games experience. So it gives you a kind of clue what type of athlete succeeds in this scenario. So for an athlete like Zoe Warren or Kelly Baker to crack the top 10 or 11 in this is a sign that you're moving in the right direction. Obviously for Zoe, she has games teams experience. She won a couple years ago with Backcountry Black. Last year, going individual, unfortunately, had to withdraw from the Granite Games. So this is a huge rebound type performance to get her season off with a little bit of momentum. Now, Kelly Baker has been in the sport for quite a long time, but this is her first individual turn since 2018. She's been going to the games on a team in the past, and I think she mentioned on social media that she really wanted to give an individual go her entire best shot that she could possibly go before maybe even stepping aside. And she is married. Her last name has switched to Shirley, so we might see that adjust on the leaderboard just so everyone's aware. But right now, 11th worldwide in the Open to kick off a full force individual run. It's a good start.
Well, over on the men's side, it looks like Jeffrey Adler is going to win the Open for the second time in 3 years, and he spoke with Lauren Kalil.
Was this the goal, or were you surprised that you unofficially won the Open? What was your mind?
That was absolutely not the goal. It was a big surprise, but at the same time, like, I won the 2021 Open with the same type of format with four scores, including 1 lift. And I think in a setup, like for points wise, like the Open, it suits me very well, I guess. But yeah, I'm really happy. It's fun surprise, but it wasn't planned at all.
And it's the same thing on the men's side. You don't want to get too enamored with all this stuff, but historically, there are some things that we can look at, and that shows that with the women too, there are some men on the right track here.
Yeah, so historically on the men's side in the Open worldwide, you look at the top 10 on the leaderboard. 10 out of those 12 years on the men's side specifically, an athlete has showed up inside the top 10 on the worldwide leaderboard and gone on to qualify as a rookie for the CrossFit Games. Even when you get rid of the direct qualification, it's 8 of those 10 years. So this is something that significantly happens with the men using the Open as a springboard to try and make their case for being a high quality rookie. You look at Cam Crockett, Reggie Fossa, Roldan Goldbaum, some of those guys that are towards the top, even go down to Austin Hatfield is another athlete that, okay, now you're starting to put some strong performances together. We've seen you at semifinals once. How do you build on that? And then if you go down a little further, Bill Leahy, guy who's got some hype coming in, I still think he's one of those athletes, even not in the top 10, could parlay this into continuing his momentum forward to a rookie appearance.
Had a record performance at the semifinals last year, so we will be keeping an eye on him. The Open is only the beginning of the season. We still have a lot of action left, and it starts in a week. The quarterfinals are right around the corner, March 16th through the 19th. That's when the individual quarterfinals go. The teams and the age groups will go after that. Then the semifinals will begin on May 18th and run through June 4th, 3 consecutive weekends of action. And then we get to the CrossFit Games, August 1st through the 6th in Madison, Wisconsin. And with the quarterfinals right around the corner, let's bring in Lauren Kalil and Brian Friend for what we can expect in the next stage of competition.
Thanks, Sean. Now we turn it over to Brian Friend, our friend of the show and specialist analyst here. I can't believe the Open is already over, but what are some of the biggest takeaways that you have from this year's Open?
To me, I mean, it is worthwhile to look at the top of the leaderboards, but when I look at like even the top 10 in the leaderboard, and I know there's a lot of people out there that have their opinions, their thoughts about the programming and what happened to certain athletes, but those 10 athletes on the men's and the women's side are very, very good, very talented, and I think we can expect about 70% or more of them to make the games this season. Obviously, a few will go team, and they won't be in the mix, but a lot of good athletes filtering towards the top of the leaderboard. And even though the test may be or feel a little different than last year's test or the Open before that, that's not necessarily a problem. And the good athletes are still having great performances.
So then who are some of the men that have a lot of momentum coming out of the Open heading into quarterfinals?
Yeah, I think when you look up in towards that top 10 and 15, a couple names that really jump out to me are Samuel Cornwallis, obviously throwing his hat back in the ring in the individual field this year. Dallin Pepper, it's not that he's such a surprising name up there, just the way that he went about his business and the balance of his performances, that was pretty impressive. And then I'm always looking at guys like Cam Crockett. This guy was just outside the top 10 at a semifinal this year, really impressive across the board in the Open, and maybe one of those guys that can make a push for one of the last qualifying spots out in North America this year. And when I flip over to the women's leaderboard, it's somewhat similar. The names that jump off the page to me are athletes who I'm looking to either reassert themselves into the competitive field, as the guys were talking about, someone like Kelly Baker, or someone who I'm looking to build upon some recent successes, like an Elisa Fuliano, made the games last year, kind of came out of nowhere, really good offseason, backs it up with the top 15 in the Open. And then kind of a parallel to Cam Crockett, Abigail Dommett, she was 16th last year in her semifinal, maybe looking to make that next jump this season.
But then on the other end of the spectrum, we have athletes like Justin Medeiros, Laura Horvath, who we normally expect to see them towards the top of the leaderboard. Both of these athletes we don't see until we actually flip to the next page on the leaderboard. Should we be worried about them? Why are we seeing them on the next page? Kind of talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, actually, both Justin and Laura have a little bit of an up and down relationship with the Open in their history. But we know that when it matters most and the chips are down, their resumes speak for themselves. I don't think they'll have any issue in quarterfinals. And if you're in their semifinal, you're just basically assuming they're going to get one of the spots. When it comes time to the games, we know what they can do. So I think that the potential reasons that both of them aren't near the top of the Open leaderboard could be different. But in neither case am I worried for them.
We know that they are the highest of high level athletes. Are there anybody who you look and you're like, oh, this might be hot water for them at this point?
The reality of just this sport in general is you can only do it for so long. And if you start to kind of look ahead to what some of those semifinal fields could look like, and the fact that at some point age catches up with everyone, there's athletes like Brent Fikowski and like Katrin Davidsdottir. They didn't have great Opens. I wasn't necessarily needing them to have a great Open, but I just want to see how this starts to play out, because as you look at the top of the leaderboard, there's a lot of young athletes, especially in the women's field, and those North American and European semifinals are only going to get more and more difficult. We saw Katrin and Sarah Sigmundsdottir both miss out by a spot last year, and there is a real possibility that something like that could happen again this time around.
And kind of with that, it seems like the competitive field, it just gets more competitive year after year. You and I, many people in this space, have met so many athletes, and a lot of what we would call bubble semifinal athletes. Like they just missed the cut, or maybe one year like Bailey Rail, they just make the cut. Is this a factor when we're looking at the most competitive semifinal? It seems like that's North America, but is this relevant in conversation?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, there's certain athletes that I don't think will be stressing quarterfinals, but for a lot of athletes, making it to that semifinal is a huge deal and a big time commitment in the entire 12 months preceding that. And yeah, North America is going to be tough. And Bailey Rail is a great example. We saw it 2 years ago. She wasn't in the top 120. She got a backfill in fight, made it to the games, made the top 20. And now she's, a regular in top 10s in competitions and showing up at the games and doing well. I think still that Europe is by far the most difficult one to qualify out of quarterfinals to semifinals, though. Their competitive history is on par with North America. It always has been in the women's field at the top of the sport. The men are catching up in Europe to the North American men. Every year they're closing that gap, but they still only get half the spots. And I know that there are athletes 61 through 120 in Europe last year and the year before, and there will be this year, that if they had the chance to compete at semifinals, would beat many of the athletes that get through in the quarterfinal. They may not be making the games, but they could have some relevance on the way that those game spots are distributed. So I think with the way the season's still laid out, that Europe is definitely the most difficult continent to compete in during the quarterfinals.
All right, we'll have to see how it all turns out. Brian Friend, thank you so much. And we'll send it back over to Sean and Tommy in the studio.
Thanks a lot, Lauren and Brian. And now that the season is in full swing, let's make some bold predictions. You have a bold prediction going into the season here.
I do. I think Brooke Wells makes the podium on the women's side this year. I think that you look at what she did at the games last year, finishing 5th, tying her career best, a calendar year after that horrific injury. I think she's only getting stronger. She's only getting better. And you look at the competition around her, Tia's sitting out the season, Kara's sitting out the season, Haley Adams is sitting out the season. That's 3 top-level contenders, obviously one being the best ever in Tia. I think there's no better time than this year for her to finally get a CrossFit Games medal.
Okay, I don't know if mine's as bold as that, but I will go over to the men's side, and I will say Chandler Smith finishes inside the top 10 at the CrossFit Games. I love what he did at the Rogue Invitational. Not too concerned about the Open. I think he starts to build some momentum at a quarterfinal. If you guys have a bold prediction, put it in the comments. We'd love to hear what they are, and we'll see how this plays out the rest of the year. Well, one of the reasons why you had to do the Open workout in Indianapolis is that you were there covering the NFL Combine. That had to be a cool experience.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously special shout out to Noble for making that happen. But we got a chance to go talk to some athletes. I got to interview a little bit of my favorite team's head coach, and Mike McCarthy.
And got a good answer out of him. It was awesome. It was
yeah,
a good question.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Got to talk to some of the top draft prospects, talk about training, talk to a CrossFitter turned QB draft prospect, and then also caught up with Cole Sager, Sam Dancer, and got to highlight an affiliate at Myriad CrossFit as well.
Yeah, well, you were at Myriad CrossFit to do that, and I know there's something special about them. So, what made that experience so cool?
Well, Lauren and I dropped in on the Friday Night Lights. We were going to hit the workout, but we really wanted to highlight what makes Myriad CrossFit special. And with that, we had a chance to talk to their trainers and talk to their owner, Jared, as well.
Super excited. So myself and Coach Anna are going to be leading the 4 o'clock and 5:15 class. We're going to run it like a normal class, but we'll do heats and making sure that we are judging each other as we go through. Partnered up with Noble, so Noble's going to be here tonight as well. So they'll have some people on site, which is going to be a lot of fun. And really, it's just that community environment. We're going to try to get as many people out here, have some drinks afterwards, hang out a little bit. But really, the fun part is everyone pushes themselves just a little bit harder than what they normally do. And that's the most exciting part about the Open. And honestly, I love the 3-week model because you can barrel through the 3 weeks and really, really, really have some fun on that 3rd week. Following through into Saturday morning when we do 23.4, our own version of with our Myriad CrossFit Intramural Open. And my team's currently in the lead, so I'm really excited to see where we finish after tomorrow.
Awesome experience at Myriad CrossFit. Big thanks to them for letting Lauren and I drop in and take part in their Friday Night Lights. And we had a little competition going on all week, including the Combine and that experience there. So you have to wait and see.
That'll be a lot of fun to watch, and to make sure you don't miss anything, you can follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and speaking of Instagram, we have Tommy's Time Cap is up now. You can get all your fitness headlines in 60 seconds. You can support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/TalkingEliteFitness. And you're going to want to check out our podcast later on this week, where we will go into much more depth on the things that we talked about here. Might even have some special guests on the show as well. That is going to do it for us. For Lauren Kalil, Brian Friend, and Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time.